Hi, this is Fritz with Against Psychiatry and AgainstPsychiatry.com. And this is section 6 of me reading two articles that are part of a two-article zine-lit, which is available on our website, www.againstpsychiatry.com. That's www.againstpsychiatry.com. And this is the second segment of an article called Don't Listen to Him, He's Crazy. So if you missed the first segment, you should check it out. And if you can't find it, just go to the website and read it because the text is all there. Anyway, let's see. Let's pick up where I left off. As a privileged kid running from psychiatric abuse, I've passed through many different worlds. Initially drawn to participate in communities with a stated anti-authoritarian political analysis, I desired an opportunity to unite with other creative folks affected by what are commonly labeled mental health issues, to discuss the problems we experience and work together toward mutual aid and collective solutions. When I first heard of the Icarus Project, I thought it might be something like I was looking for. Unfortunately, however, despite doubtlessly good intentions, what the Icarus Project presents is something quite different. The Icarus Project travels around the country distributing propaganda and holding workshops and events, often at anarchist or other radical spaces, which ignore the social and political causes of emotional problems such as abuse, oppression, drug toxicity, poverty, and malnutrition, and side with the psychiatric industry on the claim that mental illness is a biological disease caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain and treatable with drugs. In this way, the Icarus Project turns its back on the anti-authoritarian harm reduction-based philosophy of tolerance and instead invokes the authoritarian clout of the psychiatric industry. Instead of recognizing drugs of all sorts as a coping strategy and realistically acknowledging potential harms, the Icarus Project promotes the idea of psychiatric drugs as a treatment, replicating the propaganda of the psychiatric industry while issuing contradictory and ambiguous statements simultaneously opposing and advocating forced drugs and institutionalization. The Icarus Project, in a classic example of psychiatric doublespeak, claims to support a message of freedom of choice to take psychiatric drugs. But in my experience, and the experience of most of my friends, once inside the psychiatric system, consent becomes meaningless. Radical communities, like most other communities, are often quick to condemn a person's freedom of choice to use an illegal drug such as heroin as a coping strategy, but perhaps psychiatric drugs, couched by the government and the psychiatric industry as a medical necessity, are seen as more politically correct. I believe that we all should have the right to put or not to put whatever we want to into our bodies, not to be penalized for these choices, and to be judged as individuals for our actions, instead of by labels which seek to divide us. I believe in freedom of choice, but this is not what the psychiatric industry seeks to provide. As the government increasingly seeks to medicalize and regulate our emotions, enforcing psychiatric drugging both in rich communities and poor ones, you might hope that radicals would see the need for an alternative. I read the Icarus Project book, Navigating the Space Between Brilliance and Madness, a blueprint for how to supposedly support mentally ill community members. To make psychiatric industry propaganda acceptable to the target audience, anti-authoritarians, the Icarus Project claims throughout to support a diversity of viewpoints, but in actuality, they have a very specific message to get across. The social construct of mental illness as a biological defect is affirmed rather than challenged, and thus some sort of medical treatment is supposed to be in order. The text is sprinkled with feel-good claims about how special and gifted we bipolar folks are, while sections devoted to alternative, non-pharmaceutical treatments are presented in a watery and haphazard context. Alongside all the fluffy talk about the magical nature of mental illness, rambling letters about the struggle to rely on natural healing herbs create an appearance of multiple perspectives, but seem to have been merely selected for easy dismissal so that drugs can again be embraced as an inevitability with standard regrets. Drugs are frequently praised as life-saving, but the fact that many popular psychiatric drugs have been implicated as a cause of suicide is never even addressed. It is clear rather quickly that the Icarus Project is strongly pro-drug. Stopping medications is described as a severe warning sign, and it is stated that bipolar people are in danger the longer they go unmedicated. I was alarmed to see that early treatment, meaning the psychiatric drugging of children, was promoted. Then I was shocked to discover an article by a self-identified anarchist mom who calls the police on her 16-year-old son when he skips a psychiatrist appointment and tries to run away from her, and has him forcibly institutionalized and forcibly drugged. This is promoted as a necessary compromise to support a person in crisis. By advocating forced treatment in the guise of support, the Icarus Project tells us it's possible to deny individual consent while still identifying as an anarchist. The Icarus Project promotes itself as a radical, alternative voice on mental health, but what does it take to pass as radical or alternative? Is this a style of clothes or music? Does it mean stencils on patches and cut-and-paste zine-style presentation? Or does it have some sort of political connotation? Doesn't radical mean challenging the established authority? I think that alternative can mean more than an alternative aesthetic. They can mean alternative networks of support that exist independently of the psychiatric industry. It can mean mutual aid, support through times of crisis, shared meals, art groups and gardens, and sanctuary on land away from the cities. But all this is meaningless if the dynamics of abuse are perpetuated. Support can mean many things, but one thing it certainly does not mean is calling the cops. Where can an emotional person striving to live drug-free find safety and not have to fear forced institutionalization at the hands of their supposed comrades? Apparently, no longer in the larger anarchist activist scene. One particularly troubling social phenomenon, enabled both by the psychiatric industry takeover of social services and by the increasing acceptance of the psychiatric industry by folks who identify and pass as radical, is the sight of these radicals, many of whom are queer and trans punks, taking an active role in psychiatric abuse of people who they may not view as community members. At drop-in centers, clinics, shelters, and even inside the locked gates of psychiatric institutions, radical identified folks are actively dispensing toxic drugs to marginalized populations, promoting the eugenics-based philosophy that claims emotional pain and social deviance are caused by biological defects. How can I take an anti-authoritarian feminist activist seriously when their job involves telling teenage sexual abuse survivors at a homeless shelter that their pain is the result of a genetically inherited chemical imbalance in the brain, and then forcing them to take drugs in exchange for housing? How can I sit around a table and plan a political action with a radical queer whose night job includes preventing people like me from escaping the psychiatric facility where they are being held against their will? Services such as showers, needle exchange, and medical care are vital resources, and I don't mean to suggest that radical folks are mistaken in their effort to help provide them, but they need to be aware when the social service agencies they work for are promoting psychiatric abuse as a tool for gentrification. Okay, so that's the end of this section, section 6, and if you want to hear the rest of that article, don't listen to him, he's crazy, find section 7, and if you can't, go to the website, www.againstpsychiatry.com. Alright, thanks. This is Fritz.